We're going to be over in Luke chapter 12 in just a moment. We're going to start in verse 13 here in just a little bit. But before we get there, let me remind you, last week, we've been in the book of Mark for several months. And then last week, we kind of took a step back from that for just a moment to have like a little mini 3-week series called Greater. We are, just catch you up if you are new or haven't been here in a couple of weeks, our church voted several weeks back to move forward with a building project that will do several things. It will double the capacity of our worship space with a new building in the front of our property. It will add additional parking all down the side. It will provide larger hallways for us to walk through and to greet each other and to just spend some time together on Sundays and throughout the week. It will also double the capacity of our Passage Kids space by turning this into their space with classrooms over here on the side walls, and that whole back hallway completely going to be theirs. And so we talked about last week as we just kind of kicked off this idea with a greater initiative and a campaign, really an initiative or a sermon series called Greater over the next 3 weeks. And so last week we were the first week, and we went to John chapter 3, verse 30, where John the Baptist says this about Jesus. He says, he must increase and I must decrease. Or in NIV it says this, he must become greater and I must become less. And what we tried to do last week was get a picture of what this he becoming greater and we becoming less looks like. And so we brought this hourglass. And we said it's impossible for both parts of the hourglass to fill up simultaneously, but one only fills up when the other is emptied of itself. And it's through the emptying of one that the other gives rise and gives increase through the decreasing of another. And we said it's our desire, both individually and corporately, to live lives where we are consistently decreasing and where Christ is increasing, where we are becoming less and he is becoming greater. We kind of kicked off this series with that in mind. And I just want to remind you that this is a 3-week thing. We gave out these books last week. At the end, we gave one per family. So if your family didn't pick up one, we encourage you to pick one up on the way out today. But inside of this, we'll give you all the details of kind of where we're headed and what's going on. And it's really a 3-week series, but it's a 2-year initiative. And over the course of 2 years, we are saying, hey, we want to intentionally give towards what we believe God to be doing. And I just want to give you a little bit of explanation just before we jump into Luke. And maybe you've been a part of a church building campaign that went like this. Hey, continue to give as you're currently giving. And then on top of what you're currently giving, we want you to give additionally to our building campaign or our building fund. And the way the Greater Initiative works is it's not give and then give or above and beyond here, but it's saying, hey, we're going to create one fund. And this one fund is going to do 3 things. And so you don't go online and give to the general church budget and then go back online, click another box and give again to the Greater Initiative. No, you just give. And you give consideration to what the Lord would lead you to give. And through your giving, 3 things get accomplished. Number 1, greater discipleship. And the greater discipleship part of the pie is essentially this. It's essentially the piece of the church budget that continues to function as we have been functioning. It's what we stated all along is that we do not desire or we do not plan or we do not intend to decrease or to stop any current ministry, but rather increase what we are doing. And the greater discipleship represents the piece of the puzzle that kind of already exists within our church budget. Then the next is greater impact. And the greater impact piece of the puzzle is what would go towards the building at the end of 2 years. And that this dollar amount will be directly used for the building so that we can take that money that we've already saved, and we can put that towards the cost of a new building, and then we can aggressively go after that in the years to come. And then the third piece of that is greater legacy. It's our desire not to just support church plants as we've done variety of ways throughout the year, but it's our desire to send church planters out of the Passage Church into various places, both locally and beyond. And there's a piece of this greater initiative that's going to help us jumpstart that, to do that better and to do that faster. And so when you give to the greater initiative, all of these things get accomplished. And so it's our hope. The goal number 1 of the greater initiative is 100% participation from every single person who calls Passage Church home. So if somebody, you see somebody outside and they say, hey, you go to church? They say, yeah, where do you go to church? You say, I go to the Passage Church. It's our hope that then you would jump on board with what we believe God is doing amongst us and through this initiative. And there'll be talk more about it next week. But inside of this booklet, there's kind of talking about, like in regards to our giving, it says, hey, there's kind of 4 spaces and places that we all kind of fall. So for some of us to jump in and be a part of this initiative, we would become an initial giver. We've been coming to Passage Church. We've been hanging out. We've been here, but we've never given anything to the mission. And so through this initiative, maybe for some of you, hey, you're going to take the first step and be an initial giver. Some of you, you've given, but it's always been sporadic. Like you give when you get your tax return back, or you give after Christmas and somebody gives you, a nice Christmas bonus at work, so you'll give some of that to church, or maybe just different times throughout the years, kind of throw something in one of these boxes in the back. But maybe your step is not to become an initial giver, but maybe yours is a consistent giver. And then maybe you give consistently, but you don't really give sacrificially. And we'll talk about that next week. I'm sure you're all thrilled to come back and really be fired up about that. But next week, we'll talk about what it means to give sacrificially. And if you're already giving sacrificially, what's it look like to be a lifetime giver? And the way we've laid that out in the book is the question shifts as a lifetime giver to not how much should I give, but how much should I keep? And those are all kind of laid out inside of this booklet as we all together ask the question, God, what are you desiring of me to do? Like, where are you leading me in this way? And here's the deal. I know that for a majority of people, maybe not, but for several people to come into church and to talk about money is a little bit like kind of at an arm's length. Like, and maybe some of you brought a friend or a guest or a neighbor today for the very first time, and you show up, and I'm talking about money, and you're already in your seat going, I promise it's not like this. And they're right, it's not. It's not like this very often. We did a series on money about 7 years ago. Now, we've talked about money as we've talked about different books of the Bible. We talked about money when we were going through Exodus. We talked about money when we were going through 1 Corinthians, and there are some parts and pieces of Scripture that talk about money. When we arrive at those places, we talk about money. We talk about the text talks about. But in the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk a little bit about money. And I think here's the deal. Jesus talks about money all the time when you read the Bible. When you read through the Bible, you'll find out that 11 of his 39 parables have to do with money. You'll find that he talks about money more than he talks about heaven and more than he talks about hell. And you ask that question, why? What's Jesus' obsession with money? Was Jesus just trying to, on a money grab and this little circuit he's making? No, that's not why he talked about money. The reason Jesus talked about money with the frequency he talks about money is because Jesus understands that there's nothing in this world that has the potential to attract your heart and to turn your attention away from the mission of God and onto yourself faster than money. There's nothing. There's nothing in this world that has the potential to grab hold of your heart and to attach it to this world like money does. And it's his desire for our lives that we're not attached to the stuff that we can obtain or the stuff that we have, but that we are attached our hearts totally and fully, completely to him. And so with that in mind, we land in Luke chapter 12 today. I apologize, my voice today. I spent the last 24 hours from Friday at 5 to Sunday at 5 hanging out with our Passage kids at Camp Oak Hill. We had a little retreat. By the way, in case you don't already know, you need to know that in Passage Kids, I've been in ministry for 25 years, and the volunteers that we have serving your children in Passage Kids are the best that I've ever seen. And to serve with them this weekend and to watch them do what they do for 24 hours and the attention, the care, and the love and the discipleship, and that happens on a thing at a place like that over time like that is the same they get every single time they come to the doors of this church, and we are blessed by them and to have them serving our children this way. So when you pick up your kids today, if you haven't said it in a while, please just say thank you to the people who are serving in various places this morning. All right, so let's go. Luke chapter 12. Little context of what's happening. Jesus is teaching, and he's teaching in chapter 12, the first part, about how we shouldn't fear those who can harm our bodies but can't touch our souls. That we ought to fear God more than man because what can really man do to us, to use a term from the Psalms? And so he's teaching this throughout 12, teaching us to really, we don't want to fear man. Well, they can't harm you, but fear God over man. So he's in the middle of this intense teaching. Talking a little bit about persecution, talking a little bit about fearing God over man. He's in it. And I just picture Jesus reaching for a glass of water. And in the midst of the silence, just for a moment amongst the crowd, this guy sitting about 3 or 4 rows back, maybe, at least in my mind, just shouts out in a moment of pause while Jesus is taking a breath, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." What? Like we're talking about walking with the Lord, and we're talking about fearing God instead of man. And now this guy just, "Hey, my brother, tell him we're going to split this thing 50-50. Tell him Jesus." What? See, here's what's happening that day. If you are in a family and the parents pass away, the way the inheritance was split, the eldest child, the eldest son got 2/3 of the inheritance. 1/3 of the inheritance was split among everybody else. So you think about this, like what would drive a guy to shout out something off topic at Jesus in the middle of his teaching? Well, money would. Right? You ever seen, maybe it's just me, you ever seen people act crazy in the midst of family conflict over money? That's what's happening here. Like there's family tension over money, and this guy's just shouting out. And he's just saying, "Hey, what about me? What about my piece of the pie?" Jesus, tell him to do what is right. And it's out of this question that Jesus launches into a parable. Look at verse 14. He says, "Friend, who appointed me judge or arbitrator over you?" He then ordered them, "Watch out and be on guard against all kinds of greed, because one's life is not in the abundance of his possession." So he says to him, "Friend, who put me in this spot? Who made me arbitrator over these things?" And then he says and continues on. Look at the beginning of verse 15. Then he told them. There's a shift that happens. One man asked the question, and Jesus says to him, and then he turns around, he says to them. Well, why didn't he say to him instead of saying to them? Here's why. Here's the them instead of just the him. Is because Jesus knows what we've already talked about. The potential of money to distract us and to attach our heart to the world and detach it from God. And so Jesus says to the crowd, he says this, "Watch out. Be on guard against all greed." Look out, watch out, be on guard. Here's why I think that the intensity in watch out is because there's the potential here for us, for me, for you, to struggle with greed and not know about it. Like most people don't struggle with adultery and not know about it. But you can very easily struggle with greed and not know about it. Let me put it this way. Several years ago, there was a study done, and it asked a group of people. It said, "Hey, of the 7 deadly sins, what do you think is most prevalent in the United States of America?" So if you're unfamiliar with the 7 deadly sins, let me remind you. Pride, envy, wrath, sloth, greed, lust, gluttony. Okay, here they are. Pride, envy, wrath, sloth, greed, lust, gluttony. Of the 7 deadly sins, what do you think is most prevalent in America? And question number 1 of this survey, the answer to that, given by the majority of the folks who took it, was greed, number 1. Greed is the number 1 of the struggle of the 7 deadly sins of those in America. Then they asked question number 2. Of the 7 deadly sins, which do you struggle with the most? Guess which one was last? Greed. Here's what the survey tells us. I was saying, man, greed's a problem for a lot of people. And I'm glad I'm not one. Right? There's a lot of people that struggle with greed, but I don't struggle with greed. I just watch people struggle with greed. That's a problem for a lot of people, just not for me. Jesus says, hey, be on guard. Watch out. Greed is the constant nagging or desire for more. Greed breeds discontentment in your life. Right? If you ever been doing something with the stuff you have and then go do something with somebody who has better stuff than you, like I'm totally content with my car. I'm 100% content with my car. I'm fine with it. I'm cool with it. I'm good with my car. Then I'll go ride in somebody else's car. And all of a sudden, I'm not content with my car anymore. I'll see their car, and I'll notice their car has 4 door handles. See, my car only has 3 door handles. And I'll see all 4 door handles, and I'll go, man, that'd be awesome to have a car with 4 door handles. You can get in that car wherever you want when you have 4 door handles. Maybe you've been to somebody's house and you see their house and you then go back to your house and you were totally cool with your house till you went to their house. See, greed does this thing in our hearts where it grips us and it breeds discontentment and it distracts us from the mission. It says, watch out. Watch out for all kinds of greed. Then he says this next thing. Look what he said. He said, because one's life is not in the abundance of his possessions. You believe that? Do you really believe that the abundance of life is not found in the stuff you have? See, we all can believe, I agree, greed's a problem. But I kind of attach the value of my life to the stuff that I have. Right? Like we've got, because of the age in which we live, you have access that you've never had before to the wealthiest people in the world. Like you get to see the houses that they live in. You get to see the cars they drive. You get to see the clothes they wear. You get to see the places they go on vacation. And here's the deal. I'll see that. And I'll ask myself, man, you think I'd be happier if I lived in that house, drove that car, vacation where they vacation, wore what they wore? And part of me's like, yeah, I think I would be. At least let's try. Like, let's see. But what's happening? I'm seeing it, and I'm reading Jesus' words, and I'm beginning to believe that the abundance of life is directly attached to the stuff that we have. When you say, man, there's meaning in life, meaning, purpose, and value, what is that found in for you? Do you believe that the abundance of life is found in the stuff that you can possess? You've probably seen this quote. It was out there quite a bit, but Jim Carrey, the actor who was in every movie I watched for about a 10-year period of my life. If he wasn't in it, I didn't watch it. And Jim Carrey has this quote that has been out and been circulating. He just says this: I wish everyone could get rich. I wish everyone could get rich and famous and have everything they dreamed of so that they will know that it's not the answer. I wish everybody could get rich and famous, have everything they would dream so they would know it's not the answer. And it's what Jesus is saying here. Hey, the sum of your life is not in the abundance of your possessions. So let's go on. Verse 16. He says, then he told him a parable. A rich man's land was very productive. Now here we got a tendency to kind of let ourselves off the hook, right? Because he's going to tell a parable about a rich man, and what we do is like, oh, this is for rich people, right? I hope Ozuk is listening to this one, right? I hope Elon, is paying attention here because this is for rich people. I'm not really rich, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. When the Bible talks about rich people, here's what he's talking about. The Bible talks about people who have more than what they need. That's rich. So don't think Elon, when you're trying to figure out if you're rich, think this. You got fiber internet at the house? Well, you go through Bojangles drive-thru. Do you get a Bo-Berry biscuit with your meal? Like when you go home today, is your house climate controlled? Will you have anything else other than water to drink with every meal you have? See, like I got a little switch on how we think of rich, don't we? A little switch on how we think of who's rich and who's not rich. Well, let's go on because now we understand we're all kind of in the boat here of rich. Verse 17, he thought to himself, what shall I do? If you got a pen, just underline all the I's and the my's in this little thought process my man has here. He says he thought to himself, what shall I do? I don't have anywhere to store my crops. I will do this, he said. I'll tear down my barns. I'll build bigger ones and store all my grain and my goods there. Then I'll say to myself, you have many goods stored up for many years. Take it easy. Eat, drink, and enjoy yourself. But God said to him, you fool. This very night your life is demanded of you. All these things that you have prepared for those, all these things you have prepared, whose will they be? Verse 21. That's how it is with the one who stores up treasure for himself and not as rich towards God. See, it's our heart that we would desire gospel advancement over personal accumulation. No, we would desire gospel advance over personal accumulation. And this would be reflected in what we do with the things that God has entrusted to us. Because you know that you're just a manager. You're not an owner. You're just a manager of the stuff God has entrusted to you. So what are three things we see in this passage? The first one is this. We need to take an honest inventory of our heart towards money. We need to take an honest inventory of our heart towards money. See, when we talk about money in church, there's a couple things going on inside this room right now. There's some people that are still, you're kind of still upset you showed up today. Like you're kind of on borderline going, I just should have stayed home. It was rainy. It was dreary. I knew I shouldn't have been here. Like there's somebody in the room that's kind of where you fall in money. There's some of us in the room that are hearing the word greed and you're doing this. Like you're not just discounting it. You're like considering that maybe it actually might be a part of your life. That maybe it actually might be a struggle that you have in life. And then Tim Keller helps us see this. He gives us these 7 signs of money sickness. One of them is this, is boasting. When you read this parable, the first thing you notice is this continual focus upon himself. I will do this, mine and I and my and me. He is boasting that he has. And though he's not saying it to anybody else, inwardly it just has the appearance as if he's just kind of proud of what he has in comparison to what others do not have. And there's this boasting that comes along with his possessions. See, sometimes boasting can breed, it kind of comes at the end result of competition. And sometimes money sickness might be revealed if you view your stuff in comparison or competition to other people's stuff. Second thing that we see, second sign of potential money sickness is worry. We stop reading at verse 21, but if you continue to go to verse 22, Jesus turns his attention from the disciples or from the crowd to his disciples. He says this, therefore, based on what he just said about money, he says, therefore, I will tell you, don't worry about your life, what you will eat, worry about your body or what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. He's answering his question from above. Is life more than the abundance of possessions? Jesus is saying, yes, it is far more than that. He says, and don't worry about what you'll wear or what you'll eat because your life is more than that. See, oftentimes we use this context for worry and anxiety, the verses that we just read in verse 22, and we kind of rip them out of where they were actually written in the context of what Jesus was said. Jesus is talking about money. And he's talking about, then right after money, he talks about worry. Why? Because so much of our worry is connected to our money. So much of the things you're worried about, so many things you're anxious about are directly connected to money. And if worry has gripped our heart and our life in such a way, the underlining piece might be a money sickness. Second or third thing is this, money comfort. Comfort is just connected to money. I'm comfortable because my bank account says I have this. And my bank account says I don't have that, then I'm not comfortable anymore. And so I have a real comfort in what I possess and what I have and what I own. Next is stinginess. Next sign of money sickness is just stinginess. This man's property is multiplying and multiplying and multiplying, and he never considers how he might use his money for something else or someone else other than himself. For someone struggling with the symptom of stinginess and money sickness, the idea of giving is never a joy, it's always a duty. The idea of giving is never a joy. It's always a duty, and that is an across-the-board part of our life, right? You give to somebody or something or someone, and it's always out of obligation. It's never out of joy. Next one is overspending. Keller says that when overspending is a symptom of the money sickness that you might be struggling with, he says that spending becomes for you your medication, right? Like you just feel down. You just feel sad. What do I do with my sadness? Amazon is what I'll do with my sadness. Man, I'm bored. There's nothing to do. What do I do with my boredom? I'll just buy stuff. That's what I'll do. In hopes that the accumulation of stuff will fill in us something that was only intended to be filled, a void only intended to be filled by God. I read this week. Did you know that there are more storage units places? There are more storage unit places in our country, or more storage units in our country than there are Starbucks, McDonald's, and Subway combined. We got a bunch of junk, don't we? Why? Because somehow we're hoping the accumulation of our stuff will do something in us and solve a problem that's only been intended to solve through Christ. Like we're going out trying our best through in this world to solve a void in our heart that's intended to be filled by God and through a relationship with Christ. Next thing. You can't turn it off. The next sign of money sickness is you can't turn it off. You're always just thinking about what can I get next? I mean, my man right here, probably one day, he thought, man, if I could just have a field, that'd be awesome. If I could just get a small little garden going, that'd be great. And he thought, if I get a little more land, that'd be great. I tell you what, I got me some land. Now what I need is a barn. If I just get a barn, that'd be great. I need some more land because I need to fill up that barn. Oh, now what I need another barn. Got this barn, I need a bigger barn to go with that barn right beside each other. That's what I need. And it's like he just can't shut it off, the accumulation of stuff. And we see an individual who becomes completely consumed. And the last thing is this, there's the idea of stockpiling. I'm going to save an excessive amount with no consideration for the kingdom. Now, I don't want you to hear, I want to make sure you hear me on this. When you read the book of Proverbs, you'll learn very quickly that the Bible is pro-savings. The Bible is pro using your money and saving your money. The Bible talks about leaving an inheritance to your children and your children's children. The only way you do that is just through saving, like to being wise with your money. But the Bible also talks about enjoyment and spending. And like we're pretty good at that one. Not as good as saving, but we're really pretty good at the spending and enjoying. Like we're doing it. Well done. And saving is there, but then also like giving. Like and when you consider these things, and the Bible's kind of calling our lives to all of these things, where are we at? And Keller says these things kind of can kind of draw out of us or indicate to us that we might have a money sickness. And we need to do an honest evaluation of our heart. And if we discover these things, we'll understand that we're not going to be about gospel advance. We're just going to be about personal accumulation. And the second thing is this, remind ourselves of the brevity of life. Look at our guy here. He says, here's my plan. I'm going to fill up these barns. I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to eat, drink, and enjoy myself. Oh, verse 20, but God said to him, you fool. Psalm 90, verse 12 says this, Lord, teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts to learn wisdom. Lord, teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts to learn wisdom. This week, I did a funeral for a lady, 72 years old, when she died. And I shared with, on that day when I was sharing in her funeral service, I talked about how the Lord knows our numbers and knew them before we ever had one day. He knew all of our days. And I talked about Miss Sharon, and Miss Sharon had 26,343 days on earth. That's what she was given. 26,343 days. That was the number of days that she had on earth. And so I went home after doing that, and I've updated it since then for today. And I thought, okay, well, if Miss Sharon had that many days, how many days have I had on earth? And so I started counting and put it into the phone. Actually, I didn't really count anything. And it said, I've lived 16,624 days. And I had this wake-up call. And I don't know how good you are at math, but I'll help break it down for you. 16,624 is significantly closer to 26,343 than it is to zero. And there's a brevity in life. And here's the deal, I'm not guaranteed 26,343 days. I'm not even guaranteed 16,625 days. So here's what I want to do. I want to consider, with the brevity of life and the momentary time that I have, how can I live my life for greatest kingdom impact using the gifts God's given me and the things he's entrusted to me so that the most people that can hear the gospel will hear the gospel through this momentary little vapor of a life that God's given to me. See, we need to consider the brevity of life. See, this guy, it's incredible. This guy, I don't know, like in the parable, but I think like for most of us, it's our hope that we will all die of old age in our sleep. That's all of our hopes, right? And so let's say that happens, and then we die and we wake up before God, and it's our hope and prayer to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Don't you want to hear that? Well done, good and faithful servant. Can you imagine this guy? He dies, he wakes up in heaven. He comes and he's immediately be absent from the body, be present with God. And instead of well done, good and faithful servant, here's what he hears. You moron. Right? That's what the parable says. You moron. You fool. We got to give consideration to the brevity of life and the kingdom impact and the gospel advance that can happen because of the use of our life for his glory. The third thing is this, be rich towards God. Look at verse 21. This is how it will be with the one who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. How in the world do I be rich towards God as we close? I think two things, we can get these down, are great steps in being rich towards God. First is gratitude. Gratitude. Do you live with a heart posture of thankfulness to God for the ways that he's blessed your life? Like, look, I understand. You're like, well, I'm where I am because I worked hard. Congratulations. And you also worked hard with the brain that God had given you while taking breath also supplied from God. You were born to a family and in a country that's giving you opportunity to do that. Like you're awesome at computers, and that's great. Aren't you glad you weren't born 150 years ago? Right? Like, you'd be so hungry. Like you understand, like, where you are and what you have is a gift from God, and that needs to be reflected and through the posture of your heart towards him. If you have children in your home and you pray with them regularly, and I wish I didn't have to say if, but when you pray with them regularly, you need to be reflecting gratitude towards God for the things that he has entrusted to you as managers on this earth. And if you do go to sleep in a climate-controlled house, as we mentioned before, on a cold night outside, when you gather with your family, do you recognize and give gratitude to God for the way things he's given to you? When you sit and you eat with food in front of you and more than you need, do you stop and give thanks to God for what he's given to you? Do you live with a heart of gratitude towards God, recognizing that it's all his and he's entrusted this to us? And the second thing is generosity. To live with a heart rich towards God is to live a life that's open-handedly with the stuff that God has given. You know, God, I want to live rich towards you. And you can't live rich towards God if you're going to live in comparison to everybody else. You won't live rich towards God if you're going to live in comparison to everybody else. And if greed is going to grip your heart, then you're not going to live a life generous towards God, because you'll have to live a life in comparison to those around you, and that will zap any generosity that you ever considered. But what does generosity look like in your life? What's it look like for you to live open-handedly with the things God has entrusted to you in his world for gospel advance and not personal accumulation? You say, well, why do I do that? Why would I do that, Matt? Why would I live a life? Why wouldn't I just get as much as I could in the times that I have? Like, if I only got a few days, let me just live it up while I'm here. Well, no, we live generously in reflection of God's generosity to you. We give generously because God gave generously to us. We live open-handedly because God, in our sin and separation from him, sent Christ into the world on our behalf to be generous towards us in the life, death, and resurrection of Christ on our behalf to do for us what we could not do. And because we serve a God that is so generous towards us in the midst of our sin and separation from him, we live generous in the world that he's placed us in as a reflection of the generous God we serve. So you want to be rich towards God. Live a life of gratitude and generosity, open-handed with the things that God has entrusted to us. So today as we close, let me just give us a moment to pray and then consider, God, what's my heart posture towards you in regards to money? Or God, maybe I've never come to grips with your generosity, and today's the day I need to surrender to you fully and completely. Let's pray together.